Good afternoon and welcome to Lounge Lyme, courtesy of Reggae Online. It is Monday, February 3. It is 5 p.m. and we have some wonderful people you can see on your screen. I will start with Pat, who I'm seeing first. Patricia Meschino is a respected journalist and longtime contributor to Billboard, where she covers the global impact of Jamaican music. She interviews artists, she talks about the festival, and has really helped in bringing international attention to reggae, our culture, and the evolution of the music generally. And beside her is Dr. Deborah Hickling, longtime minor. I think she's done everything in media and communications. She's a scholar, media and cultural studies expert, and a policy consultant specializing in creative industries, cultural policies, and the intersection of culture and development. She's been involved in research and policy making related to Jamaica's creative economy, national development. And I would say the one man on the screen, if we didn't have Michael here, Mr. Lloyd Stanbury, who is a Jamaican entertainment attorney. I don't know if we must still call him Jamaican will live a foreign. Music business consultant and reggae industry pioneer. He doesn't like when we say that, but he has really played a key role in shaping policies and business strategies within the music industry. As a co-founder of the Recording Industry Association of Jamaica, REAJAM, and an advocate for intellectual property rights, Lloyd really is joining us here because he's been extensively involved in working with reggae artists, festivals, and just the global expansion of Jamaican music. Mr. Michael Sean Harris is just head cook and bucker washer of Reggae Online. And we wanted him to join so that we can have a perspective from him too about the role of reggae, of reggae festivals in bringing Jamaica's culture to the world. And I think it might actually sound a little bit, isn't it obvious? Some of you might be saying, but we want to talk about it using the bright minds we have here. And Deborah, I am picking on you because you're the scholar policymaker among us. In just kind of giving a context to whether or not we have policies in place that really, really help to propel the music on an international level. So we want to start with that in terms of what, from your perspective, working as a scholar, but also working in policy in Jamaica. Are there really policies in place to ensure sustainability of festivals in our local economy in Jamaica?
One of the challenges that we have, and I beg your pardon, I don't have my broadcast voice today because I'm a little chesty with some bronchial issues. One of the challenges that we have is that we tend to change our policy profile for cultural and creative industries every 5 or so years, depending on whether a government changes. So we don't really get continuity in the policies that do exist. So for example, there was a period of time when festivals were given a lot of attention in like the early 2000s, when there was a whole policy thrust towards the development of festivals. And it was at a time where you had from the Busu Festival to the, Curry Festival in different parts of the country. And as a part of the community tourism thrust, this was an important part of that process. Another issue that we have that affects policy is an issue of fragmentation. So for example, specific to festivals and to music to a lesser extent, you have 5 or 6 ministries through which different elements of cultural and creative industries policy goes, and there is very little cohesion between them. So there are policies and there is work happening in particular places, but there is no cohesive process or overarching umbrella policy. So for example, there's intellectual property policy and legislation being developed through JAMPRO. There's film stuff being through JIPO. There's film stuff being done through JAMPRO. There's an economic impact assessment activity happening through JBDC. But pulling the pieces together, no cohesive vision to push either music or the rest of the cultural and creative industries forward in a kind of holistic manner. I hope that answers your questions. It's not to say nothing is happening, just not happening in the way that is most efficient.
Or cohesive. Thank you so much, Deborah. Lloyd, I wanted to come to you to ask you a weird question, perhaps. If you can say to our audience, what in your mind are some of the biggest challenges in staging a festival?
Okay. Before I address challenges in staging a festival, I want to look at the topic, because it speaks to sustaining our culture. I think the word globally is there. Yeah. So to my mind, there needs to be a domestic as well as an international approach if we're talking about sustaining globally. Challenges in staging a festival are, there are numerous challenges, and they vary depending on whether it is a festival being staged, a festival of Jamaican music and culture being staged domestically or internationally, because we are at a stage now where our cultural expressions are being presented and consumed beyond the shores of Jamaica. Yes, so we have to look at the staging of these festivals from those two perspectives, a domestic perspective as well as an international perspective. And there are challenges, significant challenges. The challenges outside are probably more, because in order to have access to a lot of the creators and presenters, there are serious obstacles, in terms of even getting people to move from point A to point B, which poses a significant hindrance, to having our creative practitioners travel as freely as we would like to have them travel, to ensure that we are delivering authentic representations of our culture, because we are at a place where our cultural expressions have penetrated, even without the kinds of consistent policies that Deborah refers to. It has penetrated and has continued to penetrate and has been absorbed by, adopted and adapted by persons who just love what we do, enjoy what we do. And some of them are doing it better than us now. So we have to look at those issues when we're talking about the challenges in staging festivals. What challenges we have domestically and what challenges exist in terms of how they are staged on the international, stage, so to speak.
Thank you, Lloyd, and thanks for steering us back to topic. But I wanted the question for Pat, I wanted her to actually give us that. It's the journalist's eye, sometimes the outsider perspective. What do you see when you enter the festival music space that represents Jamaica? If you were to paint a picture of the culture that comes to fore when you walk into a festival, what do you see?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, because I think my first visit to Jamaica was to attend a festival. I was a teenager then. It was to attend Reggae Sunsplash. In those days, I just heard about it. It just felt like a pilgrimage. It was just something I had to do, but it was just beyond any expectation. I didn't have any, I didn't know enough to have any expectations. So there was that. And then my first press trip that I'd been writing about 2 or 3 years at that time. And I didn't know that you could actually get invited places to cover things. And somebody called me up and asked if I would like to cover this new festival in Jamaica called Reggae Some Fest. And so these are my two kind of markers very early on with festivals. And, I've covered festivals in all over the Caribbean and in other parts of the world too. And reggae festivals and other things. And I think the one thing that, in Jamaica, you'll hear complaints like, well, the shows don't start on time. The band changes might be too long. And, it's like, oh, it runs till like 10 in the morning. Like, why does it have to do all these things? But at the same time, there's like what I've not seen in any of these other locations that, yes, may start exactly on time. And when they say it's a 22-minute set, like you could set your watch to that 22 minutes. That's how exact it is. But what they have in presentation in terms of, start time 8 p.m., ending time 1 a.m., like clockwork, there's a certain energy, there's a certain vibe in Jamaica, for to use an all-encompassing word, that I've not seen anywhere else in the world. And it's not a thing you can necessarily bottle, necessarily market, but it is so much a part of the marketing. Like, you can't necessarily market the Peanut Man and the whistling sound in the night, but once you hear that and once you've experienced that, it's kind of hard to go to a festival and it seems so dead, like, to not hear that, or to the vendors when you're walking in and it's like reggae bed and it's a piece of cardboard, but no, at Sunfest or Sunsplash, it's a reggae bed, like just this ingenuity and with making the creativeness in using what you have. Like, we might not be able to go to Walmart and buy mattresses and sell them as beds, but we have access to cardboard, and this is good enough to sit down. At least your clothes won't get dirty, whatever it is. That kind of ingenuity and that kind of it's that mingling of the culture beyond just the music and what you're seeing on stage, which is amazing enough, but it's all the peripheral things, like just walking in and the lineup of people selling all kinds of things, and just hearing the voices and the way it's presented to you. And it's just and now I think you can talk about these things more freely because it's basically legal in many places. But even the ganja, for those who use or for those who don't, to know that it was so much a part of reggae culture, and through reggae music, hearing much more about it in a way that you didn't really hear back in the day. Now I'm talking, especially like about, healing properties and positive uses for it beyond just smoking it for recreational purposes, but like to then, you be on the grounds in a festival and you can see it at a certain, even when it wasn't as freely used or as, more or less legalized now, to go to a rebel salute and see the man with his, stalks and just walking through the crowd.
Or the woman with her basket on her hand.
Yeah, these are all things that are so unique to Jamaica that I've just never seen any place else in the way it is, and it's what makes it so special to me. It'd be nice if it says 10 p.m. and the show really is starting at 10 p.m. But if it's 11:30, like, so what? It's not that big a deal. I think all those things can be worked on, should be worked on. But that vibe and that energy and that, just that spirit in the air, that is something, it's either there or it's not. So I'm just, Jamaicans should all just take such tremendous pride in that being there, and the other things continue to work on. But the festivals there have such a unique identity in that global space. So, it's just a matter now of continuing to promote, continuing for the promoters there to kind of rework lineups so you show the best of what's there across generations. Because, it's like, of course, people are interested in what's happening now, and that makes sense. But there's so many great artists from maybe even it's just 20 years ago and they still maybe don't have the current hits, but when they hit the stage, it's like, oh my God, like, why aren't I seeing this person more? Because, even if your song isn't playing all day long on the radio, you still have so much to give. And, it sort of draws that line between one generation to the next and to the next, and how things get to where they are. So, to just sum it up, I just think that there's, such uniqueness in that Jamaican product that I've not seen anywhere else. And that's what makes it so special. And the, all the things, like I said, that people will complain about can all be worked on, should be worked on, but the uniqueness of it all should really be celebrated and promoted to the full extent that it can be.
I'm happy we went to uniqueness, because Deborah, Lloyd, and even Michael, I wanted us to talk a little bit about this uniqueness that is quite Jamaican. The way somebody sells you something here is very different from anyone else selling it anywhere. So Deborah, I see you're going, and then we go to Michael just to share your own experience of what happens to you when you go to a show. What do you see that is Jamaican, that is Jamaican? So Deborah, we can go to you, and then we go to Michael, then Lloyd.
I'm chomping at the bit, only because I had actually made the point to someone that what seems to be happening with especially our reggae music festivals now, is that the promoters are moving towards a level of efficiency that seems to be taking away from some of this kind of authenticity and Jamaicanness. I tell you why. Because especially the bigger name artists now, they have been exposed to the 20-minute set or the 45-minute set, and their shows are so efficient now, cue to cue, song to song, kind of movement cue to so their shows now are moving. It's not as spontaneous as it used to be. And there are certain things, like you talk about the vendors. When you have a large reggae festival and they've now moved the vendors a mile down the road, so you don't really you don't encounter them as a part of that experience. We need to be rethinking. If someone like Pat is saying, this is the thing we're coming for, are we giving up authenticity for efficiency? And I think this is really something we need to think about. I remember those old festivals when Rebel Salute was in St. Elizabeth and Manchester, when it was a real experience. It was rough, it was, but it was it was memorable. I think we have to be careful about how we strike that balance going forward. I don't know if anyone else has found it, but those shows are really now so efficient, cue to cue, that, I don't know if it's something we need to be looking at.
It's interesting you say that before I come to you, Michael, because of my own experience, Deborah, with Rebel Salute. So every year I've been to 28 of the 31 Rebel Salute shows that have happened here, whether it was the first one in Mandeville, then quite a number of years down at Port Kaiser to where we are now. And when they say, you're really going Rebel Salute, me can't bother with a long thing. And I'm like, it's my yearly pilgrimage. Everything about it, I don't want to change. I like the artists who I've never seen before, who we will never see anywhere, bringing back the old artists who we've not seen for years. I love the fact that when you're walking in, people are selling you reggae bed, reggae chairs, umbrella. The woman with the basket of herb on her hand. All of that is what I like about it. And I just go knowing that it's not perfect, but it's what I like. And so that resonates well with me, Deborah, because I think about that a lot. And I've gone to festivals overseas where that almost sanitization, it's lifting up Jamaica. You see the colors, you see, I think, where was it? Is it Reggae Sunska in Puyak at the time, Lloyd, where they created a whole food village that was Jamaican. They actually carried in some Jamaicans like Miss T and all those people in a particular year to give an authentic Jamaican feel. And because you're eating it in something different from what you get home, it didn't feel necessarily like the same thing. And so it is really the parts of the culture that we as Jamaicans may sometimes not want because we see difference, and don't underestimate the fact that outside of artists traveling, there are people are now watching other festivals through streaming and are having a different experience and comparing what we do locally to those. So Michael, I don't know, how do you feel? What aspects of culture that pops up when you walk into any of these festivals? You've had your own Gungo Walk Festival. What is that for you?
Well, I mean, also my first experience of festivals was actually going to folk festivals with Ashe, going to North Carolina or the UK or that kind of thing. So that feeling of camaraderie with the people who are participating in the festival is kind of what I was trying to recreate to with Gungo Walk. But from what Deborah was saying, I mean, I know you're thinking of the thing that you love, but also we're striving to improve. And I want to submit that maybe there's a transitional period of the striving to improve where things might feel a little bit more sanitized, but I can't think of Jamaican spirit being so sanitized and quenched or quelled. I think you just need a year or two before the ways of bringing back in those spirits is going to creep in again, and it might be just in a better way or with more structure. But yeah, I think we're still going to see that Jamaican spirit and that ingenuity and those special things, the way we call things or the way things are said and the sounds and the smells, they're going to creep in again, and the seasoning is going to be there. It can't be lost, I don't think. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
Lloyd?
I think we have a challenge in that the authenticity of our festival presentation is very important. But the reality is that Jamaican culture and our music in particular is being consumed globally. And to preserve, protect, or continue to promote authentic Jamaican music and culture in the global space is going to require a lot of attention on what is happening in that global space. Because where we are right now, the biggest reggae festivals are not in Jamaica, and that is a realization that a lot of us just don't have. It's a reality that the biggest reggae festivals are not in Jamaica. So the purveyors of reggae music in the festival space are not delivering that authentic experience that we speak to, that Patricia speaks to. That's not what is being exposed to the global audience, because the persons who travel to Jamaica from outside of Jamaica is a minuscule percentage of those who are being exposed to what is being presented as reggae and Jamaican culture. So yes, it is important, very important, to preserve the authentic ingredients that make it special. Extremely important to do that, but we need to pay attention to what is happening at Reggae Rise Up in Florida. Why have they grown from 2 days to 4 days in 10 years? When Rebel Salute has shrunk from 2 days to 1 day. And Rotterdam Sunsplash is the biggest reggae festival in the world by far. When you walk inside there, you see more Rastafari representation than Rebel Salute will ever present. Yeah. So we have to look at both sides if we're trying to, one, project authentic Jamaican music and culture globally, preserve it, and ensure that it is sustained. Focusing on what we do locally is very important, but we have to pay attention to what's going on outside. So more people are being exposed to what's happening on the outside than what we are doing locally. Within the global space.
If you're joining us, we are Reggae Onlining, and we're in the Lounge Lyme looking at the role of reggae music festivals in promoting Jamaica's culture globally. When we talk about Jamaica's culture, we're looking at our music, we're looking at our dance, we're looking at our language, we're looking at our food, all of the things you've learned in school. We're looking at all of those and how that is. I think I was speaking to director of Jamaica Music Museum, Herbie Miller, one year, and my tongue slipped, he said, because I said, I think Rastafari is the wings that reggae flew on. And that's a whole debate. It went into a whole debate because he was saying perhaps not. Reggae, it is the other way around, where Rasta flew on reggae's wings. So I don't know how you all feel about that. Did Rasta really fly on reggae's wing, or did reggae fly on Rasta's wing?
They flew
in
together.
Terms of us, you think that they are linked?
They flew
What
together, yes.
Deborah,
you're muted,
you're muted. Yeah.
Yes, I was saying they're two wings, one of each, and they need each other to keep the balance.
How you feel, Pat?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, again, like looking internationally, like reggae's decade of breakthrough in the 1970s. And, you know, at that time, to see the way Rasta came to the forefront through the music, but also through the music, people were able to learn about Rasta. It made it a very accessible way to, oh, you know, what is this all about? What is this message? It's very enlightening to a lot of people. I mean, I would definitely count myself among those people, like, who learned so much. I mentioned the marijuana example with Peter Tosh and some of his lyrics and teachings about that plant, but so many things. I mean, I learned who Marcus Garvey was, Haile Selassie, so many people that, you know, maybe are names that we hear all the time in reggae songs now, but like for the 1970s, for people being exposed to reggae for the first time, it was a great learning experience. You know, where would someone like me from America have learned about these people otherwise? You know, and I feel very enriched by it, you know, and once you learn about one, it takes you to the next thing. It's just was such a mind expanding lesson, besides the music being as great as it was, you know, and continues to be even from back then as you listen to it. But, you know, it was just such an enlightening time for so many people. You know, you know, I'm sure all of you could speak on Jamaica, but I know internationally, you know, it was just like very illuminating to many of us. Like, it was just appreciating the music, but then learning so many lessons about history, about culture, about Black identity, which is really important for everyone to learn. It's not just for, you know, people of African descent, but, you know, it benefits white people to know these things too, and how we understand things and how we relate and how we, you know, just view globally a lot of things that we just see unfolding today as well. So, you know, I feel very blessed that, you know, I came upon reggae at the time I did, not only as a music fan, but just as someone who, you know, mind was really opened as a result of listening to the music.
Thank you.
I think, you know, even though some of the developments, the beginnings of the things weren't necessarily always linked, I don't think that reggae would be where it is now without Rasta. I don't think the message of Rasta would be where it is now without reggae. Because, you know, it's like one carried the other to you know, the ends of the earth. So even if they weren't linked in the beginning, they're certainly linked now. And I don't think they you can't separate them. No. There's something that Lloyd had said that I wanted to ask about the culture, the you know, the authenticity of Jamaican culture not necessarily being the same in the bigger reggae festivals that are outside of Jamaica. But are we expecting the authenticity to be in a reggae festival that is in Germany versus the reggae festivals that are happening in Jamaica. And I mean, that's one thing, that authenticity of aesthetic and all those things, you know, when you walk in. But then also authenticity versus procedure and practice, I think, is a different thing too. Because, you know, the way things are done for efficiency and for longevity might be different in one place than in another place. And then I think that is what we need to examine as to why one thing is, you know, these festivals are becoming from 2 days to a week, and the other festivals in Jamaica might be decreasing because of the business practices, ethical practices, or you know, just what's the word I'm looking for? Just procedures, standards. You know, thinking about things like those.
Resources.
Lloyd, could it simply? I'm sorry, Deborah. Could it simply be size, like the population size? And is it? So I'm asking Lloyd to respond, but Deborah wanted to bring in also the stories product, and are we doing enough to bring in people for reggae festivals locally? When we look at the sizes, most recently, I think my most recent reference is perhaps what happened at Rebel Salute versus Intimate, Grateful in Kingston, and then Vibes Cartel, Freedom Street. So we had 4 major concerts, festivals happening around, like within a 3-4 weeks time frame. Do we really have enough people to go to all of these festivals? So by the time it was Rebel Salute, which is really attached to Tony's birthday, it's the smallest crowd I've ever seen at a salute. And I understood then why it could only be one day for this year, because Grateful had a decent crowd, Intimate had a good crowd, Freedom Street had a good crowd, Rebel Salute, which is the longest standing festival, was weakened. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about what could be happening there. We're competing with each other. We're small already. And who we're getting to come to these festivals locally?
I just want to point to where the conversation started and what Deborah said, that the business of culture is not something to just hope that it will work out. You know, it's not that kind of thing, especially for a place like Jamaica. You know, we can't just hope that things are going to work out. You know, so the weaknesses, I was going to say lack of, but it's not lack of. The weaknesses that we have experienced in terms of policy, the lack of continuity, it's some of what has been proposed and tried over the years. We have to address that, you know, to answer all the questions that we are raising here. You know, we have to recognize that our culture is who we are. It's what makes us special. You know, and when people say, what is it about Jamaican people? That is the answer. You know, it's who we are, what we do. Why, when you turn on the TV and looking at an arbitrary ad, you see a Bob Marley picture in the background, you know, of something that has nothing to do with Jamaica or music. But you see a Bob Marley picture on the wall, you know. We have to have a much more serious approach to how we deal with culture, nationally and also internationally. You know, I mean, we have embassies and stations all over the world. You know, they have a much more significant role to play than what they are now playing in terms of us answering this question. And we've fallen short. You know, it's not something that we can just hope that it's going to work out. We are lucky. No, we're not lucky. Our culture is so powerful that it has penetrated and it has survived and it has influenced the world, despite the fact that we have not paid the right kind of attention to it. And we can't continue to hope that everything is going to be all right.
Sound like we can break out in this song.
Well, yeah, it's a nice song, but it's not everything. We have to do something to ensure
Yeah.
that everything is going to be all right. We have to do things.
Deborah, I was going to throw to you, and then Pat, I wanted you to jump in after Deborah to speak a little bit about the international marketing through what you do with a billboard and how that helps us, and if we can actually do much more in that space. Go ahead, Deborah.
I pick up directly on Lloyd's point of planning. It really has to be a process of planning, but there are a number of things that we can't take for granted. This 3, 4, 5 shows. Okay, you have to remember Sting 2, which was cancelled.
Yes, which was
at the
cancelled.
very last moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these shows they each have a different kind of audience. So the kind of target marketing issues have to be examined. But you also have to remember that these 4 or 5 shows all happened at a time when we were experiencing an economic contraction. So our economy would have shrunk by 3.2% for that quarter. So by the time we got to that quarter now, the disposable income after Christmas would have been problematic for a domestic audience. Freedom Street would have done well because of their advanced sales and their advanced sales overseas. They were depending on the 18 private jets that came in. They were depending on filling every hotel and they did it. So they got it right. They had like a 3-month window when everybody was kind of clamoring to be a part of that space. Buju, not so much. Sasco, not so. Was it Sasco?
Yeah.
Not so much.
It was Sasco.
Rebel has a kind of a regular set of patrons, but then by that time now you are in what we call Ben Jonson, the middle of Ben Jonson month, right? So having had 3 or 4 events prior. So the issue of planning, economic planning and projection for these shows, the issues of the markets that are being targeted, and then now we're into a month of activities for Reggae. I don't even know how I'm going to keep up this month with all the things that are happening every single day. Just the capacity and who is going to Reggae shows now. These are older persons. You may have you may 30 plus. 40 plus are the people who want to go to a reggae show as opposed to a dancehall show. Do we have the capacity for that? But do we need to be looking more to these overseas markets? Do we need longer periods of time to be planning these shows and selling tickets and doing the kind of promotion? Are we looking at streaming? Look at what Freedom Street did with streaming, and there's a Russian model where they have, all of these phenomenal operas that they have a particular day and they stream them on that particular day, and their revenue comes from the streaming. So planning, it really has to be about planning. It really has to be about moving the process of the marketing, the planning, and the operationalization of reggae and festivals in general to a different level.
I was waiting on Michael to take me from backstage. Sorry about that hiccup. But I did hear you, Deborah. Thank you so much. Pat, I'd like us to speak to some of what Deborah mentioned earlier on, and whether or not we agree with everything. I agree with most of it, but let's take you first, Pat, and then we go back to some of what Deborah brought up.
Okay, sure. Well, I would start with Freedom Street, the Vibes Cartel show. Obviously, that's something that I came down for it, and something that would almost sell itself. He's been away for 14 years almost, and he was out, and that generated global interest when he came out. And, the announcement of the concert was far enough in advance that they Down Sound Entertainment, Cartel, they did a wonderful job of marketing it across social media and other platforms, but they really got the word out very early that this is happening on this date. I mean, all they did was post the date to begin with, and people were booking stuff for Kingston before they really knew what was happening. But again, like the Buju Banton Long Walk to Freedom show 5 years ago, those are very special sets of circumstances when artists release from jail. It's like the kind of thing that it's a once in a lifetime, because there will only be one return show. They'll go on to do many other shows, as we see with Buju now and as we will see with Cartel, but there's only one return show. So people who are invested in that and want to know about these things and also want to see it firsthand, as opposed to the wildly contradictory things that you can read online about a show, that would be attract them there. But I do agree that, it is it's a very short amount of time between Grateful, Freedom Street, Intimate. I mean, that was in the space of a week, and that's a lot of money for people to lay out who would like to go to all of these things. If you live overseas, that's a lot of time to stay away. I would have loved to stay for Rebel Salute. I've been to many, many over the years. I love it, but it was just like, I've been here since December 30th. I justify staying till, mid to late January, as much as I would like to. But, but I think so much with Rebel Salute, with other shows, it's that getting that lineup announcement out early, like, so people can really plan that, oh wow, I see this and this is happening ahead of it, but I see on Tony's show there's going to be A, B, and C. Like, I really want to see them. I'm going to find a way to make it work. That's one of the things that's so crucial when you're trying to attract an international audience, is letting them know early on what it is you're planning to present. Yes, they know Rebel Salute is the dates that it is. It's always what is Martin Luther King weekend here. But at the same time, like, when something's been around, as long as Rebel Salute has been around, it's like past 30 years now, you have to really let people know early on what it is, not just that it's happening, because they may feel like, if someone like me, who again has been to so many and just loves to do these things, if someone like me is like, I just can't make it work, then, there's people who are even be less enthusiastic, say, you know what, like, I still don't know what's happening. I'm not gonna book for that because I don't see what the lineup is. So I think that it's really incumbent on promoters to, like, get at least most of your lineup out there early and let people know what it is so they can plan accordingly. It can only help you, but I know sometimes it's too close to the actual festival date when you finally find out who's performing, and that doesn't that's a disservice to the product and what you're trying to do. And I just want to make a note about being in Kingston, this last month for the 12 days that I was there. Like, yes, it was bookended by Cartel and then Intimate, which I went to as well, and very, very good show. But in between, like, Kingston, every night of the week there is something going on. Like, if it's Original Dancehall Thursdays, if it's Dub Club, if it's Uptown Mondays. So while these are not festivals per se, these are such, again, back to what I was saying early on, like, these are experiences you wouldn't have in New York. We have reggae things happen, but you don't get that vibe like that you would get at each of these. And these are three kind of very distinctive dances from one another that happening. And it's just, in a sense, like, these things could be marketed too. While they're not festivals per se, sometimes people don't want to be in a crowd with 25,000 people. They would like to be in a space where it's just 500 people, or even less in some of these cases, but they're hearing a really good selector playing all kinds of, classic reggae or, early dance hall that hasn't gotten enough rotation lately, like that type of thing. So that's I think is a marketing that goes on year round in Kingston that I don't feel is like exposed enough. So they may not be festivals on that grand scale, but there are definitely things that music lovers or people who are visiting for other reasons or just want to see more of the cultural side of things would be interested in knowing where they're happening, how to get there, that type of thing, you know. So I think, you know, you have the major festivals, but then there's these mini little events happening every night of the week in Kingston that, you know, I think there's a different kind of person that would appeal to, who maybe doesn't, sometimes the thought of 25,000 people in one space, they're not really, they might love the music, but they might not love that feeling of that.
Kind of.
But
that's interesting.
Are lovely. And that's the thing too. So many artists roll up, like you might have 4 people advertised and you see 12 in the night, you know, and talking about that organic feeling, like a lot of these dances are just that way, you know. It's like, wow, you feel like you're almost transported back in time in a sense, you know. So I think those are real gems to Kingston nightlife that, you know, it would be great to see those promoted more alongside the big festivals.
So Coleen,
You said Michael, Deborah said something when she started about the lack of cohesiveness in the industry. Because a few years ago, you all may recall that the JTB, whether it was through TF, launched a website that would promote events happening across Jamaica, and all promoters were able to access it, upload their events, and it would be consistently promoted. It happened for a good 18 months, and then it disappeared. When you speak to most promoters now, they're unaware of that app. So it doesn't last. But I know Michael was coming in while Pat was speaking about the different things that were happening in Kingston, which is a part of the unique Jamaican presentation. When you go to the overseas festivals, Lloyd, they somehow try to capture different aspects within their festival spaces. So it's not just what is happening on stage. There is a kind of dance going on one part of the venue that we somehow don't get. And when you look at where Rebel Salute and Intimate is held now, are we taking enough advantage of the huge space to do many different things, to sort of collaborate with other promoters? So you could have a little dub club within the Rebel Salute space. You could have a of the Uptown Mondays. That doesn't really happen in the way that one would expect us to showcase more than just what is happening on stage at Rebel Salute. So I kind of wanted us to give our own perspective on that. But Michael, you were about to say something.
Yes, quickly. I just wanted to have some kind of a distinction between a show and a festival, because I think we've been kind of talking about them and they're not quite the same. I think if if all those shows that happened in January happened, within a day of each other or a couple of days, and in between there was the programming of the Uptown Monday, I mean, that could have been a big festival, but those were individual shows, So, I mean, I think when we go to Europe, sometimes those 3-day things are festivals, even the 1-day festival, but there's more than one thing happening in that whole day. There's different stages, there's different events, there's panels, there's, film this, blah, blah, blah. Like when you think of something like Kingston on the Edge, that was like a curated thing of all these events that were happening anyway, but they created a festival out of it by programming it and saying, okay, we're going to do this and this, you can go here and there and there. So just for some clarity with that.
Go ahead.
I agree with you, Michael. My concept of a festival is not just a show. A lot of times we have a show and we call it a festival. A festival most times happens on more than one day, but it can be on one day with a variety of activities in that one day. That is my understanding of what would be described as a festival. So if that's where we want to keep the conversation, we probably should. But just to touch on what you mentioned or asked, Coleen, some of the international reggae festivals try to present not just performances on the stage. I'm always gonna use Rotterdam Sunsplash as an example. They have like maybe 8 different stages, or 8 different places you can go and be entertained. You have the dance hall, which is, some people just come to the dance hall. When I'm leaving Rotterdam at 12, I see hordes of people coming in, because they're just coming to go to the dance hall. And you have the Dub Academy, you have the House of Rastafari, you have Reggae University, which is where you can go and sit and you have conversations with artists and producers and filmmakers and what have you. And there's the food, there's a whole lot that is presented representing the music and the culture around the music at Rotterdam, which doesn't exist in any of the other festivals I've seen internationally or locally. Rebel Salute is the closest that could come to that. So when we're talking about preserving Jamaican culture globally, we have to look at what is being presented by persons outside of the Jamaican space. What we are doing within our space is very important, but we have to pay attention to what is being done outside of our space, because that is definitely reaching far more people than we're ever going to reach inside of Jamaica. So when Deborah refers to ways of approaching the whole thing, we have to look at how we can get what we're doing in Jamaica out to get to people outside, whether by streaming or whatever. And then we have to also look at how best to capitalize on those opportunities that are being presented by persons outside of Jamaica who are staging festivals, presenting Jamaican music and culture. We can't just be focusing on what we're doing in Kingston or Montego Bay or Ocherius. We're not going to be in the race to preserve and promote our culture and maintain a space globally if our focus is on what we are doing inside of Jamaica at all. I don't think we're going to be able to compete, and if we are not able to compete, we're going to be misrepresented, because there are going to be persons presenting our culture in an inauthentic way. It is already happening, so we have a challenge on our hands, in my view, because the music gone. It's everywhere, and the culture is gone. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
There's so many things that are going through my mind. But first of all, to respond to the issue of that Michael, the point that Michael made about the definition. As somebody interested in policy, we have to be clear about definition. So, for example, if we are going to be developing festivals, then we have to be clear about what that is. If we're going to be developing shows for the music sector, then we have to be clear about what that is. The festival the development process is actually more lucrative, because now we talk about an entire ecosystem that we're now integrating into that process, and it may be a better development model, which includes shows. So you have, but again, we have to define it. We have to be clear about what it is we're trying to develop. The other thing that came to me as you both were speaking is this notion of, we have this thing that we have been ascribed, which is with Kingston as a creative city of music. There is so much that we can do within that particular description, which would include the development of festivals, that would include a dub club, which would include a Kingston Creative, which would include the show here or there. And I mean, even if the show is at Plantation Cove, if the bus leaving Kingston, and you kind of package it in that kind of way, there's so many things that can be done, but you have to be clear about what it is you're doing. It can't be arbitrary. we are stuck in the realm of arbitrary, and we really need to be moving out of arbitrary, not into something that is going to be so rigid that it loses its flavor, but that is designed to maintain the flavor, but is clear about its intention. Yeah. And that's where I see the thing going, and that's where I would love to see us all move it to. So those are just some of the things that, in response to the discussions.
I think we're having this conversation at the right time. A festival can be a month long. A festival can be a month long. It can be the whole month of February. If we understand and we are serious about what we're doing, we can have a month-long festival called Reggae Month.
Well, don't we? Some would.
I'm not so sure. I would hope that's what we're thinking, but I'm not sure.
I think we're thinking it, but we've not been. Yes. So what, Deborah?
Because just to say, Coleen, sorry to
that's okay. Go ahead.
All of these things that are happening, they are without there's function but no form. Yeah. So Bob Marley's 80th is coming up next week. I'm in the business. I'm hearing about the things, but again, one thing in relation to the other thing in relation this week. Yes. In relation to it's the notion of the packaging, the holistic packaging by a proactive tourism or culture or both ministry. These are some of the issues that we really need to be looking at, so that it don't seem schizophrenic, because literally, I'm sitting down here and I have 4 schedules, and I have to decide the things that I'm going to go to next week based on the various hats that I wear.
Yeah, and it gets overwhelming even for the visitors, because
yes.
When you say this is Reggae Online is doing a discussion at 3:00 on Monday or 5:00 on Monday, but there's something happening on the ground and the audience is being splintered, and everybody who is having an event in the month is sending it in. And it really is like, can we just calm down for a little bit and say what we're doing? And Lloyd, you would recall when Reggae Month started, there were clear objectives of what we wanted to do. I don't know if every year we take up that piece of paper or go back to that document and say, where are we now? Where are we today based on where we said we would go? There were signature events. We started out with our awards, then Jaria took over the awards. And then out of the blue, the ministry just started our next awards. So Jaria had to move their awards. And you feel like we're stumbling over each other. And we forgot that the objective of the awards that they started was really to highlight people beyond who was in front of stage. We were looking at the engineers, the producers, the people in media, all of those things that Jaria on our awards does. The Reggae Gold Awards is not doing. It's just like we could have had Reggae Gold Award anytime in the year. It's like, forgive me, I saw on Dennis Brown program yesterday that the children were CD. And I said, what that mean? What that mean, Deborah? Or is another?
How you
like
mean?
The CD a designation, like OB on those things? What is it?
I'm the context eludes me, so I don't know what you're talking about.
So I will just have to check that out, because it's just a part of that we're doing things, and we're doing things without any kind of we're not really collaborating. We don't know. Because if we were really collaborating, if it were really cohesive, we would not be competing. And people would think that we're coming to Jamaica. You've all gone to St. Lucia Jazz Festival, for instance?
Yes.
Do you remember when they had that?
That actually came to mind. I actually went on one of those press trips that Pat spoke about when I was in media a long time ago, and it seemed to me to be so seamless. You know, there was a plan, and then it included a trip to the trip, tourism related trip, and then you did a jazz club, and then you did the big Pigeon Island thing, but there seemed to be an itinerary. There was,
for that full week, they had a structured list, series of activities and events that you knew what was happening when you experienced St. Lucia. None of the festivals here give you that. In as much as we may think when you go to a Rebel Salute, you feel like there is something there as a package, but the fulsome experience of Jamaica is not given, and that's not considered. How do we get there? May I start from Lloyd, because I'm seeing you at the upper left.
We get there by, focusing on where the conversation started. What Deborah is pointing to, we have to have consistent policies, and we have to implement and have some continuity in what we start to do. And it has to be a collective effort between the government has a role to play, but the government's role needs to be clearly understood by the government. So it's a partnership between government entities, the creators, the purveyors of the culture, and the people who are consuming it, as well as those who want to invest in cultural activities as a business. So we have to start from that point of view, where we're going to put together this partnership where we work together to make this thing happen. This thing is huge. Like a dibby thing that we can just hope that it's going to work out, because other persons are in their little corner somewhere else in the world. They're seizing the opportunity to take advantage of this cultural expression that we have, that the world wants to consume and be a part of. So we have to get our act together, and get this partnership going and put in place. I shouldn't say put in place, those dust off the things that we have. That I think the Jamaican cultural industry is probably the most researched aspect of Jamaica ever.
I completely agree.
The most researched, reported, studied aspect of Jamaican life. From 1995, the amount of studies and reports and things, that I have seen, and they all end up at the same place.
They all end up at the same place. I would say, Coleen, in answer to your question, first of all, there are three words that I think is required right now for the entire creative economy, Jamaican creative economy: purpose, inclusion, and transparency. Those three things, and I've ascribed them to another campaign. Those are the three things that I think we need to be working towards. Now, these are airy-fairy things, and people think, what are the practical things that we should be thinking about? I get that all the time. Theory can but if this is the kind of direction we're going to be taking, one of the things that I think we need to be clear about is that the ministry and the government of Jamaica as a whole, no matter how they structure it, I think it's very badly structured at the moment, but that's a whole other discussion. The government has to be clear that they are not competing with the market, but are indeed facilitating the market. I think that's a very important and fundamental thing, that there needs to be that clear understanding. So with that, you will get the inclusion. Instead of trying to put the event on yourself, you will turn to the market and competitively say, bid for the event. Or if there are even performers can bid, provide a creative bid and a technical bid and a financial bid. And then you will see people moving in. Say again?
No. I'm
If
just thinking about that working
well,
and how beautiful it would be.
Yes, and I spoke to somebody about that the other day, and they said to me, well, they're afraid to put in a bid because somebody thieved their ideas. There's a very easy way to deal with that. You write into the contract that if we decide to use 1/3 of your idea, then you will be compensated for it. If it shows up in any form, and I'm sure Lloyd can guide us better than anybody else here. If it shows up in any form, then you will be compensated for the utilization of that particular concept, which may be integrated into a larger concept. It's not rocket science, really. And, so it really takes planning. It takes work. It takes technical work. And it's not the kind of thing that happens in front of a camera. You have to sit down and actually do the real work, right? To get the things done. And it's just an important step that we need to take. We need to be moving in that direction.
Pat, I want to go to you because sometimes when I go to these concerts or festivals, I see journalists, perhaps not of your fame, but journalists nevertheless who come to cover. How do we encourage others to write? And when you look, and I hope my colleagues locally don't think that I'm criticizing, but sometimes when I look at the coverage locally, I wonder if I'm at the same place. Was I really at that same event? Are we having the same experience? And I'm not sure if we're honest sometimes in our reporting. And we could go back to all of the journalist integrity and ethics conversation we learned in school. But what do you say to journalists or young ones coming up in terms of their coverage and what they do to promote Jamaica's culture in covering these kind of festivals?
Right. Well, the problem with journalism today, and this is from the biggest publication down to like the smallest little blog, it's this race to get everything first, so never mind what the facts are, never mind that I get it all wrong. It's just I got it first, and we see that, you see it in the paper of record down to a blog with 20 followers, and it's just something that I think the message should be like have integrity in your work. It should be the first thing. Just make it the best you can make it at whatever level you're at. Nobody, if you're just starting out, if you're sincere about a career in journalism or reporting, as you go along, you're going to get better just by the sheer habit of doing it for as long as you continue to do anything. Great guitar players aren't born that way, though some have the talent to start, but anyone who excels at an instrument will tell you they practice all the time, and that's what they do, But the thing is with journalism, it's in this day and age, it's hard to tell young people to go into this career when they're paid so poorly. And I mean, that's just the reality of it. But so I know I'm getting off a little bit, but I will come back around to what I want to say about journalists covering festivals in Jamaica. But I would hope that there would be more of a value placed on the written word than we're seeing right now, and more on a value on honesty, as opposed to just saying something was great when it was mediocre or less. It seems like in music criticism nowadays, it's like if you say you don't like something, then suddenly like you're an enemy of whatever it is, as opposed to just saying, I might love this artist, but he or she didn't do, in my opinion, their best work on this, or it felt too rushed, or it felt like it didn't have the passion of their work at a previous time. Myriad things, but there's so much, vitriol spewed at like anybody who disagrees with basically anything. This is where we are now, this polarization that just every aspect of our society, politics is just one thing. It's just like everything, So but I would want any young journalist to just, take pride in what you do, tell the truth. You can tell the truth without being, that's another thing. You have a school of journalism, not a technical school, but a school of thought that, just go in and with the most corrosive language and the most hate-filled whatever to describe something. That's not it either. You can dislike something, but be respectful about why you dislike it. And that's really lacking, like whatever your opinion is, either way, support it. That's what I see lacking in a lot of journalism today. But for young people in Jamaica, this is your country. It's your legacy coming from generations back, this music. And I wish for me as a student, when I was coming up, I wish music was taught in school, whatever facet of that you want it to be. There's so much. In Jamaica, I think it's crucial that, reggae music, at least its evolution, what it has done for the country, how it put the country on the map in a way that, I'm sure you hear this all the time, like you mention another Caribbean island, they'll say, where in Jamaica is that? Because that's the one place that they know. Because of, it can only be the music. Of course, you've had other people with phenomenal achievements in athletics, and Marcus Garvey being one of the most well-known Jamaicans of all time. But it's the music that has really put the country out there in such a big way. Bob Marley and Jimmy Cliff, but many others along that journey. But for the young people coming up now, so this is a legacy that goes back 60, 70 years, whenever recording started in Jamaica, coming up to where we are now. We didn't get to, Vybz Kartel didn't get to be who he is without everybody that preceded him. Name another upcoming artist. Shensia couldn't be who she is without all the people that preceded her. So it's really important. And I think if you put that to a young person, that, rather than just an abstract name, but find this commonality between a, like a Lone Ranger and Popcorn, or just throwing out names, but this generational link between one to the next, so that it can put it in terms that, a younger person, that will be kind of their link into, oh, okay, I get what you're saying about this person. Because, you might have generations, like in America right now, we have this film with the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. And the young actor who plays him does such a phenomenal job. And he's such a popular young actor that he's turning like a lot of 20-something-year-olds onto Bob Dylan, who was so big in the 1960s. So this is like a couple of generations on, but it's such important music that, for the lyrical content, for just even at that time in the 60s, protests in the country and like a real the civil rights movement at a crossroads in so many ways. And he was one of many voices. He wasn't the only voice, but, the fact that there's this vehicle now that's making him more appealing to a younger generation who otherwise wouldn't really care. Like, I would love to find more of those links for Jamaica, who in this day and age of the 20-somethings, even younger, find these ways to link back to the Marleys, the Tashas, beyond that, the great Ernest Ranglins, the people who were really there from day one of it all, because it's such an important legacy and you want to see it preserved. And we just see that like so many things are just being forgotten, distorted, just not relegated to being unimportant when they're very important. And just another thing with, Lloyd, you make great points about the American festivals, especially what's going on. You have Road to Tom, international festivals outside. That is something to really be mindful of, like how, again, like how early did they get out what they're doing and what is it about their lineups? I mean, we see that though in America, especially, this is a whole scene with reggae that didn't exist like 30 years ago with all these white American bands that, dominate these festivals in California. Yeah, you have a few, Jamaican acts on there, but basically it's a group of people who, would they be at reggae shows otherwise? Then we get into the definition. Is it reggae, like, is it defined by the beat, or is the culture it comes from an absolute defining factor, that if you're people coming from, America, and you've never even been to Jamaica, no familiar roots, is that still reggae? I mean, again, that's a discussion for
that's a whole show,
that's a show
that we can have at some point.
but it's just this legacy is so important, so that again, to the young people, like, and maybe to the older people raising up young people, find links that you can expose them to some of the stuff you came up with, maybe some of the stuff your parents came up with, and pass that down from the generation to the next, and just find the right way to, ensure that is understood, and that certain people are just not forgotten, and that their contributions to breaking open this music worldwide, so that there can be a Cali Roots Festival this month, or Cali Vibes this month, or whatever it is, these big festivals in Los Angeles. One last thing I wanted to say is I saw this music documentary the other night related to Saturday Night Live, the big entertainment program here, and it was wonderful, like the different kinds of music presented, really well done documentary. But I know that Peter Tosh appeared on Saturday Night Live, as did Jimmy Cliff. I don't know if other reggae artists have, but those two come to mind. And I was very saddened that they weren't represented at all. Now, not that it's the director's job to necessarily do that, because he's not Jamaican, but at the same time, the diversity of music that was presented in there, it would have been really nice to see those icons represented in that space. And that's part of history. And so, again, that's something, maybe that's an assignment for someone in the Gleaner to write about, or Observer, or whatever it is, somewhere that, reggae was a part of all of this music that we've seen for the past 50 years on that show.
Thank you, Pat. I think you've given us much more than what we're covering today. And perhaps, Debbie, we can pull out some of those at some point for future conversation. Michael, you are the performer among us. You go on this stage. And while Deborah was speaking, and earlier, Lloyd, I was thinking about, how does an artist, a band, how do they preserve somewhat the authentic Jamaican culture, and at the same time present to a global stage? So sometimes we see the performances here that are completely different, but you watch them overseas and it looks like they've sanitized it a bit. How do you strike that kind of a balance when you're presenting the music on the festival stage?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yes, but even before I answer, there's a couple of things that you were talking about that I wanted to comment on.
Okay.
We were talking about this authenticity again, and it's you might have heard me say this many times, but I think that we in Jamaica we don't appreciate every aspect of our culture, of our being, as much as someone outside of Jamaica does. When I'm here in Boston and I go to a reggae show or whatever, and I meet people who are playing, Americans who are playing in the band, and they can tell me every single person who played on the different songs, when they played on it, which producer it was that worked with them then, and which studio it was. And that is just something that's not important for the most part to other people. And I keep on saying that from primary school, prep school, there needs to be some kind of module that keeps giving this information in about the culture, not just about music, but other things, to keep us grounded in who we are and what we have and what is important. Somebody in Milan can speak can speak critically about opera, and we should be able to do that about reggae. The person on the street should be able to speak critically about reggae, about dancehall, about dub poetry, about whatever it is. And I think that would make a difference once we start to value the cadence of the language as a thing that is important, and the way the cadence of the language changes with dancehall, with whatever, because it's changing. Once we start to appreciate these minute things as something of value, I think it'll be a different kind of thing that you will see us present, and how we carry ourselves will be different as well. I mean, to the point of Debbie's thing about the, what were your three words again, Debbie?
Transparency, inclusion, and purpose.
I want to beg you to add one more word, and it could be either action or practice, because 40 years of research, and the research, every time, as you said, is the same things they say every time, but they're not acted upon. They're not acted upon, and something needs to be put into place and put into practice. And I think, and this is just my opinion, so they can come after me, but I think that the people who are charged with the responsibility of putting this research and policy things into practice still do not value those things that I'm talking about. They don't value the arts as a viable thing. Ooh. And because they don't value it, the things that we're suggesting that needs to be put in practice don't give them some kind of immediate benefit. Then they don't get put into practice, and to the detriment of everybody else. So so we keep begging for an industry, and the industry won't form because the industry is not going to serve the people who need to put it into practice. So that's just wanted to say those things, but I keep saying them. So how do you keep your authenticity versus in Jamaica versus in the US? The thing is that you have to be grounded, first of all. And it comes back to the same thing I was saying. You have to kind of be, as an artist, as a performer, you have to be aware, like consciously aware of what these things are that you bring to the table, to the stage, that make you Jamaican, that make you unique, that make you stand out in your culture, surrounded by your culture. And once you're grounded in that thing, you can't help but bring that out when you're on stage. If you are not, then you're going to sanitize, you're going to change, you're going to put on an accent, you're going to do whatever things to think that, oh, they won't understand me if I don't do this, or they won't appreciate it if it's not like this rap act. But you're not rap, and you're not American, and you're not French, whatever. Be yourself, be yourself, and value who you are, and put it on stage, because that's what they want to see. That and even if that's not what they think they want to see, it will be what they appreciate once you put your authentic self on stage.
I think you just described why Bob Marley is and always will be number one. Mm-hmm. So that's what he did. He presented his authentic self. He talked like how him want to talk.
Yes.
And guess what? Everybody understands him now.
Yeah. And so even
everyone understands him.
Even when I'm in this space, because I don't talk like Bob Marley. This is how I speak. I speak standard Jamaican English. And so if someone expects that I'm not going to speak standard Jamaican English, that's their problem. But this is my authentic self. It's still Jamaican. Yeah. Right? And I understand that. And I appreciate where the things that make me me. So I'm not going to change that for anybody. So
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see, Debbie, we are like 7 minutes out of our 90 minutes. So I would ask you, when you're making this point, to also make your closing point.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it too comes down to training and the kind of exposure that people get. I was talking at Leroy Sibley's launch of his event last year, and I said, the same class that you're talking about, module that you're talking about, everybody should be able to identify a Leroy Sibley's baseline. Last week I was speaking about speaking at the Sun City Radio was having their youngsters. They're training them in sound system, and there's so much backlash about that from sponsors. We haven't even spoken about sponsors. Sponsors saying they're not going to be providing money to teach people's children to become DJs. And one of the things that I'm saying is that we get this monotone that they're playing because you have to know what a melody is to appreciate one. And if nobody shows you what a melody is at some point and plays it and says, this is a melody, right? And this is how a melody is made up, then people are not going to know. They've heard this monotone and this is what they will latch on to. So it's really for those people, as Michael says, who are making the decisions to be clear about the necessity to expose. Like I said to them, suppose you go and you get your sample of bossa nova. Can you imagine how the crowd going rail up because nobody has ever heard that before, and you're bringing in something, it's really about that full picture is what I'm saying. It's not just about a festival, a show, a training. These are not individual issues. They are things that they must kind of integrate into each other. And this is what our culture is. And in planning, you have to be aware of all of the pieces, and you have to be aware of how to bring them together. It's a sensibility, and that is what is required now, a sensibility for advancing Jamaican culture. Don't I?
Give thanks. She drops the mic now. Pat, we come to you, go to Lloyd.
Well, I agree with Deborah's point that, how all these elements have to work together from the, everything that we've been speaking about in this session, from, trying to work together, which seems to be the most elusive aspect of all of it, like in something like a Reggae Month, trying to not have events compete against each other. And what's already there, instead of like developing a new event that goes head to head with it, like, why not come on board with people who are already doing something and strengthen what's already, the infrastructure is there. And I mean, if we saw more of that, we would be so far ahead in so many things in life, but certainly in the promotion of festivals and in the promotion of Jamaican music from Jamaica. And it would be great to have the app that Coleen mentioned that existed for a very short time in terms of letting people know the breadth of activities that take place, not just in Reggae Month, but year round. And, hopefully that we can find out about these things well in advance of when they're happening, because that's a big lure for international travelers, like to know this is happening February 8th through 21st, and I'll be there for those days, whatever it is, so all these things really work together. And we'd just love to see Jamaica at least regain kind of that preeminence in terms of reggae festivals, as Lloyd has been speaking about throughout this session, that from Europe to California to wherever, we see reggae being presented, but in very successfully in other places. But again, I'll go back to my original point, without that magical element that Jamaica brings to it all. And the magical is the most elusive of all of them. I think with planning, with strategy, with funds being spent to strengthen some things that maybe have fallen down a bit, I don't see why that preeminence can't be restored again.
Thank you, Pat. And Lloyd?
Well, for me, I think if we look at one of the main things that contributed to our culture and our music in particular, to its spread around the world, it would help us to address how we manage it. And I mean, Marcus Garvey played a very, very significant role in all of what we're talking about. Yeah. Over 100 years ago, without social media, he went out there and he told Black people, be proud of yourself. A Jamaican man did that. Yeah. And what his message spread throughout Central America, the United States, and Africa. That is what laid the fertile ground for our culture. That man. Yeah. And then we traveled. we traveled all over the place, and when we go somewhere, we try to dominate. I'm not saying it's the best way to behave, but we just try to impose our patty and our jerk chicken and everything on other people. And guess what? They love it, So we sow the seeds for our culture to spread. So our culture is not something that is bottled in a little bottle inside of Kingston, Montego Bay, and Ocho Rios anymore. So for us to manage this thing, we have to understand how it spread around the world and know that we have a significant role to play in managing it domestically and internationally. So we just need to understand that it's spread. As I say, it's gone. And we want to maintain, as Pat says, authenticity, preserve this legacy, participate in it, and help to shape what it really is, rather than have it shaped by persons who are just trying to make a buck, which is a lot of what is happening, They're just trying to make our money.
Yeah.
Because people want to consume jerk chicken and patty and reggae and dancehall. And people are capitalizing on that. Why shouldn't we?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lloyd. Thank you to all of you. Michael, I didn't take your closing word because I have a different task for you. But just want to say to Lloyd, Pat, and Deborah, I do appreciate spending this time. I do know how busy you all are. And always a good company, whether it is that I engage by myself, but in this group, it has been wonderful. Thanks for some of the strong points made as we seek to just discuss a little bit more as we celebrate Reggae Month about how our festivals, and I'm not going to say our concerts, promote Jamaica's culture across the world. Reggae Online is as busy as Reggae Month on the ground, perhaps not as, but reggaeonline.com has a couple of events. And Michael, I just wanted you to share with us about the Northeast routes that we'll be having on the 17th of February, so that these three wonderful people can join, share with students where there are students, share with colleagues and other members of the industry.
All right, so we're having our first, I'm calling it a jaminar, but it's a webinar, but it's a Reggae Online jaminar called Northeast Roots. It's going to start about 5 o'clock, and go on for about 3 hours. There's a few different things happening. Matt Jensen, who's at Berkeley College, where I teach as well, he runs the Bob Marley Ensemble, and he plays for Groundation. And he has a website called Art of Reggae that teaches courses on reggae as well. He's going to present. And Sarah Brindell, songwriting professor at Berkeley, she's going to do a songwriting workshop. So she'll do a workshop and then a breakout session for people who want to get some feedback and also do a songwriting exercise with them. And then Nathan, who runs Naya Rockers. It was a reggae backing band here in the Northeast. He's going to present on his collaborations and stuff.
That's Northeast in America.
Yes, in America. Sorry, yes, Northeast US. So he's in Jamaica a lot actually, and he's collaborating with a few people there, like with Stephen Stewart. Oh, right. So there's also the panel at the end with Stephen Stewart, with Andy Basford, with Clinton Farron, and Mikey Bennett. Just talking about their experiences as well. I will also present on all the things that Reggae Online does. And yeah, that's the webinar, the Jaminar, Northeast Roots coming up. So it's free. Let me see where people who want to register, they can go there to register or go to the website to register. Reggae Online, you can register in either place. Register to be able to participate, especially in the songwriting thing, which is really great. Sarah is awesome. Let's see, did I miss anybody? Coleen, you're hosting, we're co-hosting. And then we'll have some other things lined up. You'll be back again during the month for another lounge live.
Over time, I have this wonderful idea to just speak to the reggae wives over time for the month of March, because they do tell interesting stories when I sit beside them at festivals. And it's not all mixed up on Bangarang. It's just an interesting way to see how they, they have their own role playing in this big industry that we see and the big names that we see. So I look forward to that series coming up for March. But for Reggae Month, we continue this conversation about festival, and we'll talk to some artists and others, some festival producers across the seas, just to see their own perspective here. So thanks again. It has been my pleasure hosting with Lloyd Stanbury, Patricia Meschino, Deborah Hickling Gordon, and of course, Michael Sean Harris. Until next time, thank you for tuning in to Reggae Online.